break on day 6 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry, Tranche 3, Phase 1. We've been hearing more from hearing more from Ellie, who was deceived into a long-term intimate relationship by James Thomson, the undercover officer who she knew as James Straven. I'm joined by Eveline Lubbers and Donal from the Undercover Research Group. Most of the lot this morning has been looking at the emails that he sent to Ellie after his deployment ended. Lots of texts, emails, obviously very thirsty. Lots of requests for lingerie, naked photographs. Lots of talk about his sexual frustration. It's been kind of gross.
It was really hard to listen to, and you could hear the emotion in Ellie's voice when she was talking about it. And I think it's good to emphasize that long-term relationship is an understatement in this case, because he kept in touch for 18 years. In fact, until he called her to tell her that he was an undercover officer and had just been visiting the inquiry and been lying about his relationships.
Yeah, I think somebody commented it felt like a dirty old man, and that's kind of what started coming together. It's like none of the things by themselves seem out of the order, but when you lay it all out, when you see the messages, you see the detail in the emails, you're left and you just see the history, and also knowing that he was many years older than her, had lied about his age, he was like 15 or 16 years older than her, and to continue all this, and he's got his own relationship. He's just like, what are you playing at? Quite a fantasist. And you also hear how he was very much into James Bond. He really took on that self-belief and self-delusion that we see in so many of the undercovers, but he seemed to take it to his own special level.
It transpired that he was extracted from his deployment in March of 2002 because the trip that he took with Ellie to Indonesia, a trip that was paid for by the partner of L4 in order for him to visit L4. That was the Hunt Sab who was nearly killed by a hunter in a Land Rover on some sort of welfare trip. Was unauthorised by the SDS, who initially authorised it but then removed that in the aftermath of 9/11. It appears then he became a close protection officer, which meant that he was travelling around the globe, going to lots of different countries. Where we saw in his emails, he was in Libya at the time of the civil war there. He was in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Saudi. He included it in his fiction of being a location scout for television as to why he was doing all this travelling, and that was part of the thing which he was like kind of spinning to Ellie about what his life really was.
It wasn't just personal protection. He did that for a while. We know that, but the weaponry he was photographed with and the photos he sent to Ellie are not close protection unit. So you could infer from it that he also did some kind of, I don't know, either mercenary kind of jobs or going private, giving courses of in policing in Afghanistan or in Iraq when it was being rebuilt. He was in when Gaddafi was brought down, he was there. And you go like, why was he there? What exactly was he doing there?
Also, we hear how much about the secrecy and how these officers were, denied promotion. They had to be really careful about where they end up on. He'd been put in fairly high-profile places. So clearly, when they talk about secrecy of the unit, they're not actually really caring that much if it stands between them and a bit of fun, or as they might, bit of adrenaline, as they might see it. But he's not the only close protection officer among the former undercovers. This seems to be in quite a career for them. So yeah, lots of things slowly, bit by bit, unravelling with him.
Yeah, of course. Trevor Morris, the undercover police officer, Bobby Lewis, Bobby McGee. He went on to be a close protection officer for Blair, for numerous high-profile politicians, celebrities, and this kind of, we kind of felt when we heard his evidence, it was kind of that kind of sense that he felt he was closer to these people in some way because he did that kind of role, and you kind of wonder who it was that James Thomson was being a close protection person for in a lot of these places, whatever else he got up to in the rest of the time.
Well, given the other current news, you wonder how many of them ended up next to Prince Andrew.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like with that latest story that Andrew asked his close protection officer to find dirt on the people, on the women who accused him. It makes you wonder who was on that protection unit at the time, and how do we, how can we timeline that, and how maybe it was former STS officers, and at least it was the same kind of people finding dirt on women to protect filthy princes. It's like sort of similar to the work they did in the STS.
Yeah, incredibly sleazy. I mean, really fits in with the kind of we've got real. I mean, after seeing all those emails, all those texts, you get a real sense of the kind of man that James Thomson is, and it's a pretty thirsty, to use a young person's term, like kind of sleazy character. Really gross. I mean, it's quite time. We heard a lot about how he targeted Ellie in the first place to have a relationship with her. How she was in a very vulnerable situation at the time, homeless, unemployed. Really kind of preyed on her in that way. And she was asked at the end, there was a number of questions, which, I mean, led her to break down, and we had a break while she gathered herself to ask her if, that the mess she was in when he came into her life was like similar to the mess she was in when he finally told her in April 2018, which was the day after he gave his witness statement to the inquiry, as I understand it.
Or even when he came out of the door, he first texted her like, "Can we be in a call?" And her phone was broken, so it took a day or so. But it was like also so kind of unprepared. He only did that when he found out that. Because he had lied about the relationship, his anonymity was going to be, how do you call that? Withdrawn. So they would find out about him anyway. So then only at that moment, he realized that it might have been better to tell him, to tell them himself.
Well, there was an element of getting in front of it a bit, wasn't there? Because he was like, if you want to explain it to you, I can explain it to you. Any questions?
But again, this is part of their whole character, as you see in other ones as well, where they will deny right to the moment they can no longer deny, and then they'll try it to a new tactic, and they'll do it quite shamelessly. Listening here, you didn't get a feel that he was really coming across as someone who's contrite to recognise the damage that this might cause. If he really cared, he would have taken action well before. And, I'm really interested to find out why he thought he could get away with that, and why he wanted to do it for so long. And this is a pattern. Like, we can go back to the 80s, and Mike Chitty pretty much doing the same until he too got caught.
Yeah, I think it's a general view that they don't put a second thought into it, because they are so convinced it will never come out. And they're all like sort of shattered when it comes out, and then angry and aggressive and on the attack because they were promised it was never going to come out. And now they're forced to think about what they did, although they're hardly able to. But I do want to put some attention to how well Ellie did and what the consequences are for her. Like he kept her on the lead for like almost 20 years. She's now in her early 40s, which means this is another sort of. She was. He always kept her on the lead, and she thought, as she said, this was the best. This was her first good relationship, and because he was always there on the background, I don't think she had many other relationships. And since she found out, she's like scattered and has had to piece herself together again. She's in her early 40s, and she's not the first woman who has been denied of, like getting children or building up another relationship of trust with someone. And to have so much courage, as she showed today, to face all of that again and to bring it out in the open is like really, really impressive. Lots of respect.
Yeah, no, it was incredible, powerful testimony, and she spoke very eloquently. I thought about the sense in which that relationship with James Thomson, that was the first good relationship she ever with a man, and it was the one that she compared all future ones to, and felt that like, well, if it can be as good as that, then don't settle for anything less. So she never did settle for anything less because the nature of his deployment, he could present himself as this perfect boyfriend and connect with her in a way in which nobody else really could. She talked about how Sarah had felt very similarly, that he was like this great connection to her, and Wendy felt this deep connection with him as well. And they're all very, very different women with very different personalities and very different interests. And it just doesn't make sense that he could connect with them if he was being honest. And it was really that which made her realise how much, because at first when he told her that he was an undercover police officer, she thought, well, some of it might be real, that maybe he was doing that job, but then there's this real connection, and she realised that none of it was real. That he was a completely false character that he'd been presenting to her all the entire time. It was incredibly powerful.
But also the impact on her since then, in terms of like she checks the boot of her car before she drives it. If she meets she essentially said she doesn't like meeting new people, and when she does and feels she can get on, she checks them out because But this is a theme again we see in so many where, when you believe you can trust and then you have that shattered by their lies, then how do you build the ability to trust again? And it's horrible, but she's not alone in that. Many of the women have spoken about similar feelings and similar experiences, and this is the damage these undercovers do.
Yeah, I mean, we're on the lunch break now. We'll be going back in fairly soon. We'll be hearing from Wendy, who was someone who James Thomson deceived into a long-term friendship. He maintained contact with her until 2018 as well. Interestingly, when he told Ellie about the fact that he was an undercover police officer, he asked her not to tell Wendy. This is something that kind of goes throughout all these undercover officers thing, this sort of like trying to bind to silence their targets and stop them from sharing information. But Ellie did tell Wendy. She'll be giving evidence next. Is there anything else you want to add before we start the video? Yeah, so tune in for that. We'll be doing a Twitter Spaces this evening, sort of recapping everything we've heard today. So join in for that if you can, and see you in a bit.